If there's one thing everyone has heard at least once in school, it's there's a place no one is allowed to enter. At my school, that place was a locked room in the back hallway right next to the library. The door was old, dark wood with scratch marks near the handle, as if someone had tried to break in and given up. And the most curious detail, unlike the other doors in the school, this one didn't have a sign above it. It was simply the forbidden door. Rumors ran rampant. Some said it was where old school supplies were stored. Others swore it had been used as a detention room decades ago. But the most famous story was this. A student disappeared inside. Yes, he disappeared just like that. And of course, no one ever proved anything. Personally, I never took these stories very seriously. I mean, come on, if a student had really disappeared inside a school classroom, wouldn't it have been in the newspaper? But then again, you know how it is. Imagination is fertile. And let's face it, a locked door in the middle of a building where everything else is open gives rise to all kinds of crazy theories. And this is where my group of friends comes in. We couldn't hear about a mystery without wanting to poke our noses in. There was Rafa, the official jokester, always ready to turn any serious moment into comedy. Camila, who pretended to be skeptical but was the first to cringe at any strange noise. And Jonas, who thought he was a natural investigator like a teenage Sherlock Holmes, but ended up more of a bumbler than a genius. And me, of course. I was the voice of reason, or at least I tried to be. It all started on a boring Tuesday during recess. We were leaning against the cafeteria when Rafa dropped the bombshell. Did you know that today marks exactly 20 years since the student from the locked classroom disappeared? I almost choked on my ham and cheese sandwich. You just made that up, didn't you? He laughed. I swear to God, I heard two teachers talking. Camilla's eyes widened. You're kidding. Jonas already had that look on his face that makes him think he's about to get into trouble. This is a sign. We need to investigate. I raised my hand, trying to stop him. Guys, seriously, this is just a legend. I bet there are only broken chairs and moldy books in there. Rafa nudged me. What if it's not? What if something really happened? Imagine if we find out and it goes down in school history. I laughed, but inside I felt a chill because let's face it, a part of me wanted to know what was inside. Camila shook her head. I'm not going. There's no point in insisting. I don't want to get in trouble. 5 minutes later, there she was with us walking down the back hallway. The place was always quieter than the rest of the school, maybe because few people passed by, or maybe because everyone instinctively avoided it. The door was there, still, imposing, full of mystery. Rafa approached and knocked twice. Nothing. Jonas tried the doorknob, locked, as always. Camila looked around nervously. If any teacher sees us here, it's over. I can already see it. I, on the other hand, couldn't stop staring at the door. It was as if something was calling me. I can't explain it. Curiosity, maybe, or just my mind playing tricks. Suddenly, Rafa bent down. Hey, there's a space down here. We crouched down together. Indeed, between the door and the floor, there was a tiny crack through which we could see nothing, just darkness. Jonas, excited as ever, already began to come up with a plan. If we get a screwdriver, maybe we can pick the lock. Camila looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. Oh, sure, great idea. Let's break down the school door, get expelled, and join the police force. Perfect plan. I laughed, but before I could speak, something strange happened. A noise. On the other side of the door, a chair scraping. Clear. The four of us stood still. The silence after the sound was so thick, I could have sworn I could hear my heart beating. Rafa was the first to break the mood. See, I told you, there's someone in there. Camila was pale. That's impossible. No one's been in there for years. Jonas stared at the door. Or maybe they have. We stood there for a few seconds, not daring to move a muscle, until the school bell rang. The shock was collective. We ran back to the main hallway, trying to act normal, but deep down, we all knew that noise wasn't in our heads, and that was how our investigation into the locked room began. We didn't know it yet, but we were about to find ourselves in the biggest mystery of our lives.
For the rest of that day, I could barely pay attention. Math, it flew by. I don't even know if I learned anything. History, the teacher talked about the French Revolution, but all I could imagine was a guillotine falling on us if they found out we were messing around. And of course, every time I looked at Rafa, he gave me that little smile. That smile that means, we're going to get into trouble, and you know you won't be able to resist. During the next break, we gathered again behind the gym. Jonas arrived excitedly. It's decided, we'll go back there this afternoon. Camila, indignant, this afternoon? Are you crazy? What if someone catches us trying to open that door? Rafa shrugged. Well, we'll make up an excuse. Like, I don't know, we lost the soccer ball and it rolled all the way over there. I laughed. Of course, because the school will believe a ball went through a locked door. Then Jonas lowered his voice, as if it were a bombshell revelation. I think we should look for information first. Nobody locks a room like that without reason. There must be a record somewhere. Some teacher. I don't know. And that was the first official step of our investigation. Finding out what the teachers knew. At our school, there was a teacher everyone knew had been there since the age of dinosaurs, Professor Antonio. He taught geography, always wore the same plaid shirts, and had a somewhat absent-minded manner, but everyone respected him because he knew everything. If anyone was going to know the history of that room, it was him. On the way out, the four of us followed Antonio to the teacher's lounge. Rafa was the spokesperson, of course. "Professor, do you have a minute?" He looked over his glasses, a little suspicious. "What's up, guys? Did you finally learn where Asia is on the map?" Rafa laughed awkwardly. No, it's just, we wanted to know about the locked room near the library." The air around us grew heavy. Antonio suddenly became serious. He took off his glasses, calmly cleaned them, and asked, "Who told you about that?" Camila and I exchanged glances. Jonas, as always, didn't miss the chance to dramatize. "Let's just say we heard things." The professor sighed. "You shouldn't get involved with that." "But why? What's in there?" Antonio was silent for a few seconds. Then he simply said, "Some places have stories that are better left unsaid." And he left, leaving us in the hallway, our mouths open. That only heightened our curiosity. If the oldest teacher in the school didn't want to talk, then there was definitely something big going on. Jonas, with that cheap detective glow, declared, "Time to look in the library archives." Camila snorted. "The library archives? Do you think the librarian will let us look in those?" Rafa smiled. "Of course she will, if we distract her." And surprisingly, it worked. While Rafa struck up a conversation with Marcia, the librarian, probably about soap operas since he seemed to know every character's entire life story, Jonas, Camila, and I ducked into the small back room. It was filled with boxes, old filing cabinets, and enough dust to trigger 10 allergy attacks. But after rummaging through piles and piles, Jonas found a manila envelope marked Sector C, Old Wing. We opened it. Inside were a few yellowed pages with school minutes from the 1980s and 90s. Among them, one caught our attention. Police report September 12, 1995. Sophomore student missing during the night shift. Last seen library hallway. Door to adjoining room found open. Case not resolved. I felt a shiver. Camila put her hand to her mouth. So it was true. Jonas seemed about to explode with excitement. "Do you realize? It's exactly today, 20 years and a few days after the disappearance." Before we could process it further, we heard footsteps in the hallway. The librarian was returning. We hurriedly hid the envelope inside Jonas's backpack and pretended to be looking at encyclopedias. Mrs. Marcia appeared at the door suspiciously. "What are you guys doing here?" Rafa quickly answered, "The, geology test." She arched her eyebrow. "Geology? Here?" "Yeah, about rocks." It was the most ridiculous excuse I'd ever heard, but by some miracle, it worked. As we left school, we gathered again. That sheet of paper left no doubt. A student had indeed disappeared near the locked classroom. And even worse, the door had already been open once. Camila was almost in tears. "Guys, this is too serious. We should tell someone, not play Scooby-Doo." Jonas shook his head. "If we tell, they'll hide everything again. Only we can find out the truth." Rafa nodded. "Exactly. We're going in there tonight." I swallowed hard. Part of me wanted to say, "You guys are crazy. I'm out." But another part, the bigger part, wanted to be there to see it for myself. In the end, I didn't have to decide. Rafa looked at me and said, "You're coming too, right?" And I, against all common sense, replied, "Sure."
The truth is, I've never been a fan of breaking rules. If my mother found out I was sneaking into school at night, she'd ground me until I was 30. But there I was at 10 p.m., leaving the house to study at Jonas's house, one of the biggest lies I've ever told. Jonas was already waiting for me on the corner, carrying a backpack full of things. I asked what was inside. He replied, survival essentials. When I opened it, I found a flashlight, a pack of cookies, duct tape, and a bottle of hand sanitizer. Is this essential? I asked incredulously. You never know when you'll need to sanitize your hands in the middle of a dark investigation. I didn't have the strength to argue. Shortly after, Rafa appeared on his bike with an excited smile as if we were going to a party, and Camila arrived huffing and puffing. Do you realize what you're doing? This will get you expelled at the very least, Rafa shrugged. Or it'll give us the best adventure of our lives. Our first mission was to get in. The school was on a relatively quiet street at night, but the wall seemed higher than ever. Rafa, as always, was the first to try. He climbed it easily, like a poorly trained ninja. Jonas took about 5 minutes, slipping twice and nearly ripping his pants. Camilla managed with a certain dignity, and I was left hanging like a sack of potatoes until Rafa grabbed my arm and threw me inside. Mission accomplished, he said proudly. But the adventure was just beginning. At night, the school felt like a different place. The hallways, always noisy during the day, were plunged into a heavy silence. The elongated shadows of the lockers gave me the impression that someone could be hiding behind any door. Jonas, of course, wasn't helping. Have you guys noticed that this looks like a horror movie set? I bet a ball will roll down the hallway by itself soon. Camila slapped his arm. Stop talking nonsense. And, as if preordained by the universe, at that exact moment, we heard a knocking noise from down the hall. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. Relax, Rafa said, trying to remain calm. It must have just been, a book falling. But neither of us really believed that explanation. We reached the library hallway. There it was, the locked door imposing as if it held a secret no one wanted us to discover. The rusty metal sign simply said, Sector C, Old Wing. Jonas pulled something that looked like a makeshift lockpicking kit from his backpack. Camilla's eyes widened. Where did you get that from? YouTube tutorials. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. After some embarrassing minutes, we heard the lock click. The door gave way with a creak that echoed down the hallway like a scream. A smell of mold and old wood escaped from inside. Rafa shined his flashlight inside. Ready? I wanted to say no, but my legs were already carrying me inside. The room was larger than it looked from the outside. There were old bookshelves covered in dust and stacks of boxes piled in the corners. But what caught my attention most was the furniture against the walls. Broken desks, cracked chalkboards, a globe that looked like it had seen better days. In the center was a table scattered with papers. We got closer. Some were old student records, others were drafts of school projects. But among them, we found something different, a red-covered notebook. Jonas opened it slowly. The first few pages were filled with scribbled notes, student names, dates, and strange symbols. Some looked like interlocking circles, others like drawings of eyes. Camilla whispered, This doesn't seem normal. And before we could analyze it further, we heard another noise, a metallic dragging sound coming from the back of the room. We shined the flashlight in that direction, and we saw something that chilled my blood. An old cabinet locked with a chain that moved on its own.
The cabinet at the back of the room seemed harmless at first glance, but with every second we spent staring at it, it seemed larger, as if it hid something much older and perhaps more alive than any of us could imagine. Rafa, as always, was the first to break the silence. So, who wants to be the brave one to open it first? Jonas stepped forward. Me! He tried to force the chain with his hands. It didn't work. Camila grumbled. I knew it would be a terrible idea to go in here. I stood still, watching. Something about that cabinet made me uneasy. The creak of the old wood, the musty smell, the feeling that invisible eyes were watching us. And yet, my brain kept thinking, if there's something valuable or secret in there, we have to see it. Rafa walked over and picked up the flashlight, shining it from inside the chain. Look, there's something written here. It was a scratched out, almost illegible message. Don't open, don't touch, he's watching. Camila took a step back, her eyes widening. Okay, now it's officially scary. Jonas, unfazed, began trying to pick the chain with a makeshift screwdriver. Relax, this won't defeat me. I'm an expert at opening locked things. I wanted to laugh, but the tension was too great. And then, as Jonas struggled with the chain, a noise echoed behind the classroom door. What was that? I whispered. Rafa shrugged. It must be a rat or the school playing tricks on me again. But it wasn't. It was the sound of footsteps, heavy, coming from the classroom door. We looked at each other. This isn't normal, Camila said. With one last effort, Jonas managed to open the chain. The locker creaked eerily, revealing its interior. And inside? It was empty. Absolutely empty. No accumulated dust, no old objects, nothing. Seriously? That's all? Rafa said, disappointed. But something caught our attention. There was a note taped to the back of the locker. Camila approached, trembling, and read aloud. If you've made it this far, congratulations. But the truth is closer than you think. Look in the place no one looks, but everyone passes by every day. I frowned. What does that mean? Jonas scratched his head. It seems the whole school is one big puzzle, and the locked room is just the first clue. Rafa laughed nervously. This is getting fun and terrifying at the same time. After an hour of searching the room and finding only the mysterious note, we decided to leave before anyone noticed us. The feeling of being watched wouldn't leave us. On the way back down the dark hallway, Camila kept looking back as if expecting to see someone following us. Guys, seriously, someone's here. I can feel it. I wanted to say it was paranoia, but I couldn't convince myself. There was something about that school that was different at night. Something ancient. Something that knew we were there. When we reached the exit, we agreed to meet the next day to continue our investigation. The atmosphere was tense, but at the same time, there was a strange energy of excitement. Because now we had a real lead. And no one could predict where it would take us.
The next day, I couldn't pay attention to anything. Every time I glanced at the library hallway, I remembered the locked door and the mysterious note. That message had been hammering in my head all night. Look in the place no one looks, but everyone passes by every day. Rafa came into my room during break with the smile only he could maintain, even in the face of chilling situations. So, ready to discover the truth? Jonas was already excited. Yes, today we're going to solve this mystery once and for all. Camila, still suspicious, snorted. If you disappear, don't say I didn't warn you. We returned to the library hallway. It was strange how different everything seemed when we knew we were about to discover something. Every door, every shadow, every locker seemed to hide a secret. Jonas pointed to the floor. Look at the pasteboards. There are scratch marks here. Rafa shone the flashlight. And there they were, small scratches that formed a sort of path. Following them, we realized they led to an old, dusty bulletin board. Camila looked suspiciously. Do you really think the clue is there? I felt a shiver, but there was something about that board that told me we were on the right track. Among the old papers and newspaper clippings, we found mentions of the missing student, stories no one had ever spoken aloud. What was most striking was that most of the records mentioned a secret room at the back of the hallway, but no one knew exactly where it was. As we searched, Rafa stumbled upon something. It was a small, old metal box with a rusty lock. Jonas tried to open it with the improvised screwdriver, but the lock wouldn't budge. This is getting too interesting, Rafa said, smiling nervously. When we finally managed to open the box, inside was a notebook with pages filled with notes from decades past, diagrams, names, dates, and strange symbols. Everything seemed to point to the locked room. And suddenly, we heard another noise, a metallic dragging, as if something was being moved in the back of the room. We looked at each other. Don't tell me, Camila began.
But no one finished her sentence because something really moved. The noise grew louder, dragging across the classroom floor as if something or someone was moving in the shadows. My heart felt like it was about to leap out of my chest. Rafa, as always, was the first to try to laugh it off. It's probably just the wind. Camila gave me a look of pure skepticism. If the wind can drag metal and notebooks, let me know, Rafa. Jonas, who already considered himself a professional investigator, advanced slowly, shining his flashlight into the back of the room. What we found made our breath catch in our throats. An old cabinet, as old-looking as the school itself, was slightly open, and from it came a metallic scraping sound. "It moved by itself," Camila whispered, pale. We approached cautiously, as if each step might awaken something we didn't want to see. Inside the cabinet, more old boxes and notebooks, but nothing alive. Still, there was something different. A small door, hidden behind the boxes, so well camouflaged it looked like part of the wall. Rafa grimaced. Seriously, the whole school never noticed this? Jonas ignored the comments and began examining the door. There were symbols engraved on it, similar to the ones in the notebook we found on the bulletin board. It confirmed it. Everything leads here. This must be the secret entrance to the locked room. Camila took a step back. Okay, if I disappear, you can tell my parents I was too brave and stuck my nose in the wrong mystery. I looked at them and realized that, despite our fear, we were all determined. It was as if the locked room had called us to discover something ancient, hidden for decades. As we examined the symbols, Rafa noticed something curious. Look at these markings. They look like dates. Jonas picked up the notebook we had found earlier and compared it to the symbols. They're records of every time someone tried to open the locked room and something disappeared. Or someone. My stomach churned. So it's not just a legend? It seems not, Jonas replied, looking serious. Camila took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. This is getting really weird. Like, supernatural? Rafa gave a nervous smile. Or the best horror story we'll ever tell our grandchildren. Meanwhile, I felt a presence, something watching us from down the hallway. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the noise from the closet. It was something more conscious. After a few minutes of discussion, we decided to open the small, hidden door. Rafa held the flashlight, Jonas began turning the old doorknob, and I just tried not to think about what might happen. The door gave way with a sharp creak that echoed through the silent hallway. On the other side, a small, secret corridor, dark and damp, revealed itself before us. The walls were covered in ancient symbols like writing no one else could decipher, and at the end of the corridor, a beam of light came from a smaller room. It was as if we were about to discover the truth of the locked room. "Shall we go?" Jonas asked. We all nodded, taking a deep breath. But at that moment, no one knew we were about to discover something very different than what we had imagined, something that would change everything we knew about the school and about ourselves. The secret corridor seemed endless. Every footstep echoed as if the school itself were watching us. Rafa was ahead with the flashlight, Jonas was trying to decipher the symbols on the walls, and Camila was 2 inches away from me, clearly ready to run away at any moment. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. Despite everything, there was a strange excitement, that feeling that we were about to discover something no one else had known for decades. At the end of the corridor, we finally reached the door to the smaller room where the beam of light was coming from. Jonas tried to open the door. It was locked. Rafa snorted. Of course, there's still a lock. Nothing is simple in this school. Camila was already biting her nails. I can't believe we're doing this. I pushed the door gently. Surprisingly, it gave way. Inside, the scene was unexpected. There was no ghost, no cursed armor, no cursed books. Instead, the room was filled with antique mirrors, cloth-covered furniture, and dozens of black and white photos of the school itself, all dated decades ago. In the center of the room, on a table, a small tape recorder was playing. And suddenly, a familiar voice began to speak. If you've made it this far, congratulations. But the truth is simpler than you imagine. We all looked at each other. Who? Whispered Camila. Jonas walked over and pressed play on the tape recorder. The voice continued. The missing student never left the school. He moved into a secret room created by the former teachers themselves to protect him from problems that could not be solved.
But time passed, and the legend grew. He has lived here, protected, studying the school's history alone for over 20 years. My jaw nearly dropped. Wait, the missing student is alive? Exactly, said the voice on the recorder, now with an amused chuckle. And you were the first to arrive here in 2 decades. Welcome to the locked room. Rafa, incredulous, blurted out, "So the terror, all the noises, everything was just him?" The voice replied, laughing, "Do you think a legend needs to be scary to be entertaining?" Suddenly, hidden doors began to open. The student, now a man, with gray hair and an old-fashioned uniform, stepped out from between the mirrors. "You're brave or completely crazy, but I like this." Camilla took a step back, relieved and scared at the same time. "Huh, so no ghosts." He smiled. "Not exactly, but I promise this room holds more mysteries than any of you could ever imagine. Maybe one day you'll come back to learn more." Rafa, ever the jokester, wasted no time. "So the legend was educational?" We all laughed nervously. Even after all the fear and tension, the plot twist had been totally unexpected and somehow funny. We left school that night with mixed feelings. Relief, surprise, and the certainty that scary stories sometimes have explanations no one expects, and that the mystery can be much more human than supernatural. And of course, the 4 of us had a story no one would ever believe unless we told it with all the drama in the world.